Welcome to Viewdify with View Designer. I'm Ahmed Kaja from Pinegrow, and let's build this beautiful Viewdify card visually with View Designer from a blank canvas. Now, if you are new to View Designer, take a fully functional trial from viewdesigner.com, and without further delay, let's get started. I already have View Designer open here at my end. Let's click on this new project button and go with select the meta framework of our choice. I'm going to go with Nuxt and Viewdify, which is our component library, and click on this clone blank template button. So that copies a clone command of a GitHub repo into our clipboard. Let's go to our editor, open our terminal, and navigate to where we want to create our project and paste that command in here. And you can optionally change the name of this project at the end. Enter, and that clones that repo, sample repo. Let's cd into that newly created project. You can drag and drop, now you can drag and drop this newly created project from your file explorer into VS Code. I'm going to open that using a command here. And this template is a simple one. It has an index.view page, a home page with a span, a placeholder span. The first thing we want to do is npm install to install all the dependencies. Our dependencies are installed. Let's start our dev server by running npm run dev. Let's come to View Designer, close this dialog, and let's open the newly created project in View Designer. So since the dev server is already up and running, it's already connected indicated by the Meta Framework logo in the toolbar on the right. Let's click on this button in the middle, open the startup page. That opens the startup page, which is a home page, which is a blank canvas to start with. And that has a placeholder span in here. I'm going to collapse this project panel by double clicking on this icon. And let's select this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom my whole interface a little bit just to make sure that it's more clear for you, but you don't really have to do it. And I'm going to select window, UI zoom 125%, and also reduce the page width to fit into my screen. And we've got a tree panel here and a props panel on the right here. So let's select this span and let's go back to our design. Our Viewdify card has an image on the top. So Viewdify includes beautiful, amazing set of components. Let's click on the insert icon button in the toolbar and search for card, and vCard is available. What we can do now is drag and drop that just above the span. So we have a vCard in our page. It's empty at the moment. Let's select the span and just push it in, using this element menu. So it is part of the vCard now. So let's add some margin on the top because it's kind of stuck to the top. So we can use the Viewdify utility classes here. Select this icon, second icon, and add some padding by using the helper here. I'm going to add a padding of 6 on the top, a margin of 6 on the top. So the card is not stuck to the top. And what we can also do is use the props panel and set some width to the card. So the V card has a prop called width. Let's scroll down and there's a width, and I'm going to set it to 375. So our card is only 375 wide. And now let's get the card to the middle. We can use the spacing control. So use the second, click on the second nav, and then we can set a margin on the left to auto, and then margin on the right to auto, which brings the whole card to the middle. So our card is in the middle at a width of 375 pixels. Now let's come back to our design. So we've got an image on the top. So we need to use an image component. Let's select the V card here, and I'm going to scroll, bring this a little down, and then click on the insert icon. And you can see on the top that a vCard can have some child components like vCard item, vCard subtitle, title. So I'm going to go with vCard item and close this dialog now. And we can see that the vCard item is already added to as a child of the vCard. Now I'm going to delete this span because we don't need that anymore. And let's insert our image in. So Beautify includes an image component called vimage, and let's bring that as a child of vCard item. Beautiful. Now our image is in there, and we can see that the image takes a couple of props. It can take a source. It is using a placeholder image, but what we can do is this particular page from the blank template we used contains some state in the script section called hero image URL. So if I come back to the editor and then scroll up to the index page, we can see that it's containing a image. I'm going to use this one for now, and I'll tell you why I'm using this one later. So we can bind that that particular variable by clicking on this drop down next to the source prop, and then say select hero image URL. So that selected our image. So our vimage is in place, but we've got a problem. It's not covering the whole space. And also we want to restrict the height of that to a particular a constant. So we can use the props again. So there's a height prop here, and then the vimage. So I've got vimage selected in the tree, and the height, let's set it to 250. So it's always going to be 250 height, and we can actually set it as a cover so that it covers the whole parent. So select this cover and then click on this and check this, so that now we've got our image in place. So our vCard item, the first child, is done. So let's go to our design again. So the next one is just below the image. We've got the name of the cafe and some description about it, and the icon next to it. So let's go back to our card, select the vCard and select on insert. Now let's add another vCard item, which is the next section down the image, below the image. Scroll, close this dialog, and under the new second vCard item, we can get a title and the other description in there. So I'm going to bring this a little down so that the tree is visible. So let's add a title. So the easiest way to do that is we can add a child to this by using this element menu here. And I want to add it as a first child. So I'm going to click on this, which opens the same dialog that opens when we click on the insert button on the toolbar. And we can add a span that says Cafe Bella Vista, which is the name of the nearest cafe to me. Let's click on this button, and that should add the span in place. So now the vCard item so we can communicate with components in view components with props and slots. So props takes state, and slots can take markup. Now this span is a markup. So what we can do is in the props panel, we can see that when we select the span, it's showing the slots of the parent, which is the vCard item, and it takes append, default, prepend, subtitle, and title. So obviously this is a title, so we can slot this span into the title slot of its parent. So by clicking on this add title. So what it simply does is it wraps that span with a template and using the name of that slot. So obviously, so the slot takes care of styling that to a particular in a predefined way. So we can see that our Cafe Bella Vista is a title now. But we've got we need to add some color to it because we want that to be standing out. So what we can do is select that Cafe Bella Vista, and I'm going to use the floating tools now. You can, if it is not open already, you can open it by clicking on the window menu and hide or show a hide panel and click on this floating tools. You can also use the shortcut double shift on your keyboard, And now that we've got this selected, let's make sure that the element menu is closed by clicking on this icon on the toolbar and then deselecting selected element menu so that it's not showing up on the top, and click on this first icon to add a primary color. So the template came up with some predefined palette. So I'm going to click on this first one to add the primary color to the Cafe Bella Vista. And that is looking good. So our title is done. And next to that, we need to add a subtitle which says local favorite. So easy again, what we can do is add a span below this. But keep in mind, the next row actually has two elements, a local favorite and an icon. So we need to actually have a container. So let's add a div. So I'm going to add a sibling just below this. And I'm going to say I want a div and then space in the next row and span, and let's call it local favorite. And then let's add that in, and we can expand this div, and it's now part of the template slot. Let's select the div, the container, and push it out so that it's out of the slot. And it's out of the slot. Now, as we did previously, we can again use the slot to slot this div into the subtitle slot of the parent wrapper vCard item. So when we click on add this subtitle to the subtitle slot, it will take care of styling it as per the card's definition. So we can see that the local favorite is nicely styled as a subtitle. And let's add our icon, which is next to the local favorite now. I'm going to close this floating panel now, and then let's add a sibling next to it. We can use the Viewdify icon component by searching for icon, and we've got a V icon here, and then let's drag that in here next to the span. Escape to close the dialog. So we've got a beautiful icon here, and let's add some margin on the left so that it's not sticking to the span above next on to the left of it. Using the props panel, again the spacing, add a margin of say 2 or maybe a little more. Let's make it left 4. So that's kind of spaced well. Now obviously we want a different icon that is like this. Let's go back to View Designer, and let's check the V icon props. So it can take a icon prop, and let's click on this icon which opens icons which is integrated as part of View Designer. Let's search for fire, and this looks like the one. So let's select this, and that icon is in here now. So it needs a bit of a color. It's white in color, and it's having a different color in the background. So let's go back to our icon. I'm going to click on double shift to open the floating panel, and let's add a color to it, which is white on the top. And this is the material palette color. So that's white in color. It's not visible now. Let's add a background by clicking on this icon now, and let's add a background of primary color, or maybe primary darken one. Yes. So it's looking good now. So we've got a local favorite and we've got an icon. So our second slot is done. And let's go back to our design again. So the third one is, again, it has multiple elements in that row, a rating element, and also display what the rating is and the number of ratings. So let's go back here, select the vCard item. And now what we can do is again add a container because we've got multiple elements. So let's add insert after. So insert a child to the end. And we're going to take a div, and let's click on that to add it to the card item. So we've got an empty div here. So the first thing we want to do is add a rating element. Now Viewdify has a beautiful rating component. Let's search for rating, So V rating, so let's drag that in as part of the div. I'm going to close the floating icon now, floating tools. So the V rating is kind of large by default. Let's check on the props, play with it. So it's got a density. Let's make it compact. So that looks like it. And it has a lot of other props which you can play with in View Designer. And there's also a size prop. So we can make it X small. And I believe that's too small. Yeah. And let's make it small. Yeah, I think that looks like it. And let's set the color of it. I'm going to click on double shift to bring the floating tools. And let's set the color of that by selecting amber. So I believe this is amber. Yep. I'm going to go with just plain amber. Ah, that didn't work. It's because we have to use the prop. So V rating has a prop called color. We can use the same color picker, and let's select the amber color. I'm going to go with amber darken 1, and that seemed to do the trick. So we've got amber, but it's not filled in because there's no rating. So we can set some rating by adding the rating to the model value prop. Let's say 4.5, and that filled up the rating. Looks good, but it's not 4.5, it's actually 4. The reason being, by default, the V rating doesn't take half increments. So there's a prop called half increments, which we can toggle to true, and that should take 4.5. Excellent, so our V rating is in place. So what's the next one? Display that rating and also the number of ratings. So again, that should be simple. Add a sibling to the V rating, add a span, let's call it 4.5 and 413 ratings. And let's add that in. So it's stuck too much to the rating. So let's add some margin to it. On the left, let's add a margin of say 3. That's good. And let's make it 4. That's looking good. And they need to be aligned in the center horizontally. So we can make the parent div flexible. So let's click on this last nav in the props panel and click on flexbox and select flex, and that should make the div flex, and we can align the items to center so they are always in the center. So the V rating has some padding on the top, so we could add some margin on the top just to match it. So let's click on this second icon and add some margin on the top, just 1, so that it's actually in the same row. Looking good. So now we need to actually make sure that it's mono, the color is mono. So let's bring our floating tool and let's add a, so we can add a color, but I would actually prefer adding opacity. So let's click on this drop down here, and I'm going to say medium opacity. The advantage of this is it'll make sure that it kind of, the color doesn't, I don't use colors directly. I usually use a palette or one of the utilities so that it's compatible for both light and dark mode. So that's looking good. It has to be smaller in size. Let's click on the typography icon, the second one, and let's set it to a subtitle too. It's still looking big, or maybe a caption. That looks like it. I'll close the floating tool, and that looks good. I think we've done that. So the next one is quite simple again. It's just a span. I want to copy this text and then go back here, and let's add a sibling below the div, the previous row, by clicking on this, and then we can say div, and then add a child to it, a span, and paste that text, which is the name of the cafe. And let's click on this div, and then that's added in here. So we could add some margin on the top. So let's add a margin of 2 so that it's spaced from the V rating just above it. So let's come back to, so it's actually not that big. So it has to be, we can use, so let's select the span and then bring the floating tool, and let's check on typography, second icon, subtitle 1, subtitle 2, and I believe it's actually the subtitle 2. I'll go with subtitle 1. So that looks good. So the Italian cafe row is done. So the next one is the body text. So let's go back to View Designer, close the floating tool. So let's select the V card because we've done 2 sections of the card. And the V card now can take not just a card item, but it can also have a card text, which will make sure that the typography of that subcomponent is done properly in a particular way. Let's add this V card text and escape to close this dialog. And under the V card text, we can add that text in. So I'm going to copy this and come back here, add a child and a span, and paste that text in here. And let's add that in, escape. So our text is in here. So what I'm going to do is select the V card and set some bottom margin so that it doesn't stick to the bottom. Just for this demo, I'll set a margin bottom of V6, MB6, so that it's kind of not stuck to the bottom. We'll remove it later. I'll keep it 12 so that it's up here. Excellent. So that's done. So V card item is done. So let's come back to our design. So we've got a divider in here. So what we can do is add a divider under the V card text. So let's search for a divider component. Divider, and there's a V divider, and let's add that in. Escape, and we've got a divider here. It's stuck to the span just above it. Let's add some margin to it. Maybe set a margin of 3 or 4 maybe. That looks good. So we can toggle this visual helper so that we can see the line. It's not visible at the moment because it's selected. So that should help see the elements without the element being selected in the page view. I'm going to toggle, that looks good. I'm going to toggle it back, and let's come back here. So the next one is the tonight's availability. So let's come back here and select the V card, and I'm going to collapse this V card text. In fact, what we can do is we can select this V card and then again add a V card item, escape, and then V card item is here on the bottom. And let's get the tonight's availability in here. So same technique, add a span and paste that text, and let's add that in. And in order to make it a title, use the slots again and push it into the title slot. So that's looking good now. Excellent. So what's next? Just below that, we've got a couple of chips. So let's select the template and add a sibling below the template by clicking on this icon in the element menu. And then Vuetify has a chip group. Let's add the chip group by selecting that. Escape to close the dialog. So the chip group at the moment is empty. Let's add, we can click on this insert and search for the chip and then add a child to it. So we've got an empty chip. The chip can take a text, a prop, and let's look for the text prop and then say 5:30 p.m. So that looks like it. So we've got the 5:30 p.m. here. And what we can do now is we can duplicate this V chip, how many times? 4 times. And the shortcut key in View Designer is Command D or Control D to duplicate it 4. But it's a bad practice. It's ideal candidate for a for looping V4. So I'm going to select these 3 chips and delete them. And let's write some script now. Let's use our editor. So I'm going to save this page before swapping back to the editor. And what we can do is up here, let's create an array const, and we can say available time slots is an array that is 5:30 p.m., 6:20 p.m. and 7 p.m. This is a colon, this is a colon, and the last one is 8:10 p.m. and save this and come back to View Designer. Now what we can do is select our V chip and use the scroll down in the props panel here, and then come down until we find View Directives, and let's add a directive to loop it. So we can select VFAR to loop it, and it's looping it 4 times by default. But what we want to do is we want to use an array. So the current component state is displayed just below the tree in the state panel, and we've got the available time slots array here. We can expand it here, and we've got 4 time slots. Let's copy the key and replace this 4 with that array, and rename this val to time slot. Enter. And whenever we use a VFAR, we must use a key. So click on this add directive, select key. So that added a key. So it is using, it has created 4 instances of the V chip. Let's go up to the props. Now what we can do is instead of sending static text into the text prop, we can remove this and then use the binder to select the time slot of the looping. So that should make sure that the V chips now got the time slots from the array that we just created. So let's save this. Now we want to actually select one of those chips. So the V chip group can be V modeled, which is bound to one selected chip of its group. So what we can do now is we can have a reactive variable. Let's go back to our editor, and just below this I'm going to create a ref const selected time slot is equal to ref of, and it can have an index of this particular array. So we'll go with default 0, which indicates 5:30 p.m. Save, and then come back to View Designer. And now what we can do is select VChip group and add another directive which is called vModel. And now we can select, copy the key of the ref that we just created, which is a selected time slot, and then bind this vModel to that and enter, and you can see that 5:30 is selected. Now the page view is currently in edit mode for us to design, but it is actually a browser, a Chromium browser within View Designer, so we can interact with it just like a browser by just toggling this icon here in the toolbar to go into click mode. So let's click on this. Now when we select 6:20 p.m., we can see that the state panel is showing the selected time slot as the index is 1, 2, 3, you can follow it here. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So we've got the selected, so we have the selected time slot now in our state. Let's save this and let's come back to our design. So last one is a reserve button. Let's go back to our tree, and we can use the shortcut Alt click to collapse all the tree elements in the same level. Alt click, so that will collapse all of these. Let's select the V card, and let's get our last one, which is a V card action because it contains a button. So let's select this, escape, select the V card actions, and now we can add a button in there. So search for a button component, which is a very powerful one in Vuetify, and select the V button. And we've got a button in here with a placeholder text, and let's change the text of it to reserve. So we've got a reserve button in here, and let's come back here. It's looking good. the button is quite powerful. Let's play around with its props. So there's actually a large size. I don't think we want a large button. I think the default or maybe the small one should do. I'm going to keep it default for now. And we can change the variant of it, make it a flat one or a tonal one. I'm going to go with tonal. And you can see that if we toggle the display helpers, it's not aligning to the left here. So what I'm going to do is use our spacing control again and add a margin on the left. Let's keep it 2. And it seems to be too close to the bottom here. So let's add a margin on the bottom as well, 2, so that it's kind of, not sticking. So let's turn off toggle the display helper, and that looks good. Maybe we'll keep it in sync with our design and keep the variant to be default, which is elevated. So this looks good now. Now what I want to do is when we click on this button, we want to display which slot is selected. So what we can do is select the button and add a directive now. And this time we'll add a click directive. And what it did is it added a function in here. And what we want to do is we can show a toast or a snack bar. So we can say this function is going to be show status. And I'm going to pass true. I'll tell you why I'm doing that. And enter and save. Always save before swapping between View Designer and VS Code. Let's go to VS Code. Now what we can do is define that function. Const show status is equal to consumer status, and we can have another ref called status display, and by default it's false. When we click on the button, what we'll do is toggle that value to the status, which is true. So save. So what we have is when to show the status and a function to toggle to show the status. So let's now come back here. So it seemed to have actually conflict. So I'm going to say reload. I think it should be okay. And scroll down all the way to the button. And let's add a snack bar. Snack bar. Yep, that's the one. Click on it. And it's added as a child of the button, but we want it next to the button. So I'm going to click on this to be next to it. Nothing is displayed because snack bar doesn't display anything by default. But what we can do is now we've got the status display, which we can bind to the snack bar. So let's add a vModel again to the directive. vModel, and when we want to display the snack bar is using the status display key, and let's bind that in here and save. So ideally what should happen now is we are in click mode. When we click on this button, the snack bar displays, which is great. Now we just have to display that particular selected time slot, and now select the snack bar, and it can take a span as a child under this default slot. And then now we can say 5:30 was reserved. Let's add that in. And now let's try clicking on this button. So it is looking darker. We need that in white because snack bar is always darkened. So we can use our floating tool, double shift, and add the text color to white. And now let's close the floating tool, and now let's try clicking on the button. It looks good. So, but we do not want to show 5:30 all the time. We want to show the actual time that it was, which was selected here. So let's save this page now, come back to our script section. We can add a computed value now, and I'm going to use a shortcut, or maybe not. I'll add a computed that says selected time slot, selected slot display is equal to computed, and that can take a function, and what we want is we want to return the selected slot, which is available time slot, and use the index that was selected. So we can return a text that can say available time slots, and in the index is selected time slot dot value, because it's a reactive variable. I don't think I need this because we're not constructing anything. Oh, we can actually use that. Was reserved. So that's a computed value, which looks good. Let's save that. And now we've got the selected slot display. Let's come back to View Designer. Now, instead of using this text, we can delete that, and then we can bind selected slot display, which we just created, which is a computed value. Let's save now, and we are in click mode, and 5:30 p.m. was reserved. 6:20 was reserved, but it's not hiding because it's just staying there. So the snack bar has another prop called, let's scroll down, timeout, which can be changed. I'm going to set it to 2 seconds, or maybe just 1 second. It's milliseconds here, so 1000 for 1 second. And now let's select this. 1 second, done. 7 p.m. done. 8 p.m., 8:10 p.m. was reserved. So let's save our page, and let me toggle my UI zoom, my interface zoom to 100%, and looks good. So we can click on this icon on the toolbar just to preview this page in the browser, which should open that in the browser, and that looks good. So let's come back to View Designer. I'm going to add one small thing just for fun. So the template that we used was a blank one. It had a blank page, but it also included a local component, a component in the components folder. If you scroll down, you can see there's a dark mode switch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include this dark mode switch next to the title up here, next to Cafe Bella Vista, and that added just below the span. But I want both of these elements to be in the same row. So what we can do is contain both of these elements in a div. So select the span, add a div before that, escape to close this dialog, and select both of these elements and push it into the div. And now what we can do is select the div and make it flexible using the props panel. So it should be in the same row now. We can use justify content to position both of them at both ends so that the button is always on the right end. Now let's try clicking on the button to enable dark mode, right mode, dark mode, light mode, looking good. So I'm going to save this, and let's open this again in the browser by clicking on this icon in the toolbar, and let's test it out. Dark mode, light mode, and it's looking good. So it's good that we actually added opacity instead of the color, so that the color of this will be automatically determined depending on the color mode that's currently in. So even the color, the primary color, is different in light mode and dark mode, and it's looking good. And let's also test our reserve button. Select 6:20 p.m. reserve, that's good. 7 p.m. reserved, that's good. 8:10 p.m. so that's good. Now let's come back to View Designer, and I'm going to double click on this props panel just to collapse it, and let's expand this dialog here. And there's this dialog that says there's a panel called Design Panel, and let's have some fun. This is again optional, but what View Designer does is the template that we used has these colors predefined as a palette for Viewdify. So what we can do now is click on the second design icon here, and that will restart the Nux dev server and apply the new theme to our page now. So the restart of the dev server took a few seconds, but now we can see that the hero image changed because we used the image that was already in the index page, which is tied to this design, and our colors have also already changed. And let's try the third design. It took a few seconds again for the dev server to restart, but now we got a new set of colors, a palette, and our hero image also changed. You can also click on this surprise me button to randomly select Unsplash image to apply, generate this palette colors, dynamically from that randomly selected image, just to have fun. Heads up, it's a little addictive. So yeah, have fun. So the last thing we want to do is save this page. And let's come back to our editor. I'm going to stop the dev server now. And I'm going to say npm run generate to build this app. So our build is done, and there's a .output folder. I'm going to right click here, reveal in Finder, to open it in my file explorer, and move this Finder to my browser space. And in I've googled Netlify drop and click on Netlify drop. Now what we can do is go to our Finder, and inside this output folder there's a public folder which contains our build. So let's drag and drop this public folder into the Netlify drop. And guess what? Our app is live now. Let's click on this link to see our app in Netlify, dark mode, light mode, and selected 7, 8, 10. Now our card is actually ready, and it's looking really good. So let's wrap up going back to View Designer. I'm going to close the project, and I just want to call out the fact that View Designer is agnostic of meta frameworks in the Vue ecosystem, and also of component libraries. Let's click on this new project button, and if you want a more powerful utility set of classes for styling your Vuetify apps, you can, instead of using Vuetify utilities, you can use something like Tailwind CSS or Uno CSS with a Wind preset. So there are two sample apps that you can clone by clicking on this icon here by the side of this, and there's also, you can open that in GitHub as well. Check out these templates, and we've got a beautiful template, starter templates for you to explore for various meta framework component library combo. Have fun, and thank you very much. Have fun with Vuetify with Vue Designer. See you in the next one. Thank you.